Welcome, Nicole. Thanks so much for coming on the show to talk about what homeschooling students can do when applying to college or thinking about college even, right?
Thanks, Sally.
Um, so how, I mean, there are some homeschooling students who are incredibly strong. And I want to say that we were thrilled to see them at the most selective institutions, University of Chicago when I worked there. But then we would also see some homeschooling students who were just really not as prepared as they thought they were. So I think this is a pretty important topic for families. What are some ways that a homeschooling applicant can make sure that they are going to be a strong applicant for whatever their goal institution might be? And I know that's a broad range because there's a lot of different kinds of universities out there.
Exactly. And when I worked in college admissions, I used to read all the homeschool applications. So
Mhm.
I think coming from that perspective, I've seen a lot of different types of applicants. And I'd like to start by even saying that there's so many reasons why a student may homeschool. So
Mhm.
as far as it could be a dancer, it could be an athlete, it could be a student who, for whatever reason has chosen to homeschool. So I think there's a lot of different reasons. So I always like to
Mhm.
kind of start with that. But I do think as far as students really need to consider their curriculum. And what I always say for any student,
Mhm.
whether they're in a traditional school setting or as a homeschool student, is those five core classes are really important. So as far as like the English, the history, the
Mhm.
math, the science, and a world language. And I would say that stands true for a homeschool student too. Like think about that core and think about, if possible, and I know it probably is a little bit harder, but think about the rigor. So one of the things that we always looked for when reading a homeschool application is what were those classes that maybe the student took outside of the home. And
Mhm.
we always loved to see community college classes because then you were able to see how is that student doing maybe in a traditional setting. And so if they took a community college class, it was a grade from a professor. And so that was a really great way to
Mhm.
show academic rigor a little bit too, and kind of how a student did in that setting.
Mhm. Mhm. I mean, it's also we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but it's also a good recommendation, right?
Yes.
I mean, when I would see recommendations from, the parent, I just couldn't take those seriously, even if the parent had been the primary educator, even if the parent was a university professor and was highly educated. This is someone who should be biased about their child. Of course, they think their child is great. So you need that unbiased or at least less biased
Right. And it
recommendation.
and
Yeah.
it, again, that same idea. It is someone outside of the home is not who's
Mhm.
not only teaching that student, but
Right.
again, that recommender. Like it's a different perspective, which is so nice to see.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Now what about I mean, another thing that, I think the stereotype of a homeschool student is that they're very isolated, that they don't interact with others. And obviously colleges look at extracurricular activities. So what can homeschool students do around that?
That's a great question. There's a lot of ways to interact, I think, too, that I think whether it's a community activity that maybe they get involved in, there are some states, and this is something to keep an eye out for. There are some states and school districts that allow homeschool students to participate in extracurricular activities through their local district.
Mhm.
So whether it's sports, whether it's theater, whether it's clubs and activities, sometimes, and again, that's something to check with in your local district and your state to see if they do in fact allow students to get involved in activities through the school district. But that again is going to be a school by school basis. But
Mhm.
there's so many ways to get involved. And I think as far as like even just within the community or volunteer work or just, a local theater troupe or scouting, like whatever kind of the students' interests are, there's always a way to find it. And so it is a really good thing to do. Like I know as an example, like, and this is kind of interesting, is my kids play in a soccer league on a Friday night. And it was more the kids created this league and it's through a local organization. And I happened to run into someone who said, "Oh, my student decided to be a part of this homeschool team." So,
Mhm.
like, a homeschool team created a Friday night league team, and they're part of this group. So, like, that's a really great way to socially interact, whether it's local homeschool students or
Mhm.
whether it's with whoever you can gather as part of these teams. And I know
Mhm.
even like our local ski mountain, they have a day when homeschoolers can go and ski at the mountain. And I think that's a great way to interact too. Like, you're not just on the mountain, you can go inside and have lunch and be able to collaborate with other kids who are doing the same as you are.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, one of the students that I worked with when I was at the University of Chicago, who was a homeschooling student, she belonged to a debate team that was for homeschool students in the Bay Area of California, and that it
Yeah,
just and she did incredibly well. Like, they competed at very high levels. I'll also say too that for people who homeschool for religious reasons, involvement through their church is a really obvious
yep,
solution to that. Yeah.
exactly. 'Cause I think there's also, there's so many opportunities, like, again, that idea of there's people are homeschooling for many different reasons, but I think as far as, like, if you're able to collaborate, especially with a religious organization, there oftentimes can be mission trips that can be throughout the school year and different ways to get involved in the community just in relation to those organizations.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits of homeschooling is the flexibility of it. So, maybe take advantage of that, whether you're homeschooling for religious reasons or complete other reasons. Well, at the beginning of this segment, you were talking about actors, dancers, etc. I mean, that flexibility is a lot of why they're homeschooling. It might be the
Exactly.
entire reason why they're homeschoolers. So,
Exactly. And what
yeah.
we're seeing now, I think too, which is interesting and different, is that there's kind of co-ops for learning too. So you could go in, it could be once a week, it could be twice a
Mhm.
week, but you can collaborate with these small groups. So that's another good thing to look for to see if like a curriculum, like maybe you don't have a skill in art, but your child really wants to take an art class. There could be a local art class in the community, but also through these co-ops, there could be
Mhm.
extra art classes as well, or even music, or honestly anything.
Mhm. So let's kind of dig in. I mean, we talked about the curriculum a little bit, but what are options for parents who they can help their student, but they're not comfortable designing a well-balanced curriculum? They've got their skill set, but I mean, speaking for myself, I went back to college and I had to take statistics, and so I did the math test, and I mean, I went through pre-calculus in high school and I did just fine, but I had forgotten everything after geometry according to this test. So no judgment on the parents who are not able to help their students with higher level math. What are some of the ways that people can get that more balanced curriculum? Like, beyond even maybe before they're ready to go to a community college. Like, I'm thinking about like 8th graders, for example.
I think it's a mix. I think there's a lot of different reputable homeschooling programs online that students and families can take advantage of. Like, it could be a combination. Like you said, like some parents are so well educated and just want a different environment for their students. And so homeschooling is the right way to go. So you're able to there's lots and lots of reputable online programs with structured
Mm,
courses that students can do. So it doesn't have to be that parent starts from scratch and creating
mhm,
their own homeschool curriculum. Like, there are core structures that they can take advantage of from start to finish without the community college classes.
mhm,
Students can take online advanced placement classes if they so choose, if the parents don't feel that curriculum is best suited for their teaching style either. So as far as, it all depends on the type of classes a student wants to take, but and certainly the structure that the student is looking for. But a lot of those online classes and through online homeschool programs can be probably one of the best ways to do it if you want a structured and almost a little bit more of a rigor to a program.
mhm, mhm. And how can someone figure out, like, what makes a good balanced program? I mean, one of the things I'm specifically thinking about, and I really welcome this, is I've seen on sites as diverse as small religious colleges and, like, I think the UCs, advice for homeschooled students. So
Mhm.
do you advise them to go to the college websites as well? That's one of my go-tos.
I think it's either the college websites, or sometimes I would also encourage, utilize your local school, and like as far as even a high school guidance office, to
Mhm,
go in to say, like, how does this look in relation to the state requirements for a student to
mhm,
graduate from high school within a certain state? So, they, even though they're not your college counselor, they are someone that you can go to and ask questions and provide guidance and even some direction as far as programs go.
Mhm. And if you're taking classes at the community college, they have counselors there too. Like, what's it gonna
Yeah,
take to transfer to the four-year institution? What are the
exactly.
broader classes that you should be taking?
Right. And I think as far as just making that determination of like what does transfer? Like even if I was to take certain classes, like what are those classes that are going to be essentially most beneficial as I get into the college curriculum? And maybe I am more STEM related, maybe I am a more humanities student, but what are the classes that I should take that essentially down the road are going to be the most beneficial?
Mhm, mhm. So I think another challenge for homeschool students is that they don't, I mean, some of these programs that we just discussed will provide a traditional kind of transcript. But what in general might they need to do that's different from a traditional student on their college applications or throughout the college process? What are some of the tips that you might give there?
I would say one of the tricks, and this is a combination. I do think, and this is hard to say because so many schools are test optional. I know for a time period they did the colleges and universities they like to see standardized testing from a homeschool student, but with so many that are test optional, that has been waived a lot. But sometimes the testing was a really nice addition to an application to gauge a student's kind of skill level. I think again, the grades in an outside source are very helpful. But I also think the colleges and universities want to see the students' level of preparedness. And a way to do that is interact with the colleges.
Mhm.
Many schools, like maybe if it's a smaller school and they offer the option for an interview, that's a good way to interact with the college to let them know, like, I am prepared for college, like I am ready for that next step. And so I do think many of those ways to engage with colleges and universities to show that you're ready is a great way to kind of communicate with the schools.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, if they offer interviews, take advantage of interviews, whatever it might be. So, all right. Well, we it's time to wrap this up. So thank you so much, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you, Sally.
All right. So and thank you to Jessica Mertz of the Cleary Center and Beth Feinberg Keenan, who opened up the show talking about how to interpret financial aid packages. Do be sure to join us next week for discussions into the Cal State system in California. I know you've all heard of the UCs. The Cal States are excellent options as well. Also, we will be talking about how to qualify for medical school when you graduated from college already and didn't take the right courses. It's not too late. In addition, we'll tell you what to do when you've received your financial aid package and it isn't enough, which I think a lot of people are going to feel that way. And finally, I want to remind you that you don't have to listen to our shows live. Every show is accessible 24/7 on the Voice America website, and you can also download every show for free on Amazon Music or iTunes. If you're curious about other topics, do remember to look through our archives. You can find them along with our blog posts on blog.getintocollege.com. That's blog.getintocollege.com. And don't forget, we're here every Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific.